This is something I've been thinking up for weeks, and it's how to fix the DC universe with one Superman movie. And it just so happens that Bob Chipman put out his How to Fix DC's Batman movie series, and I think that these two kind of work in tandem with each other. I think you probably do both, and both of our ideas are going to be better than what DC actually come up with, so I hope you enjoy it. Okay, point one. Henry Cavill. Now, I like the guy. He's pleasant, but he's poisoning the DC universe. Okay, right. Let me be clear on this. It's not Henry Cavill who's poisoning the DC universe. He's just doing as he's told. But his presence as Superman and everything that entails is poisoning the DC universe. So we need to get rid of him. And I mean just like, gone. But not in just, let's pretend this didn't happen. Might be an idea to actually address exactly what they've done and exactly what they've done wrong, but in a clever way so that people actually go, okay, and this is the new balance. So listen up. Now, I've said before, the best director for a Superman film, J.J. Abrams. Now, I can tell I've already lost a whole bunch of people, or they've immediately jumped to the comments and, J.J. Abrams. Hear me out. J.J. Abrams is really, really good at resurrecting dead franchises. Think about Star Trek, think about Mission Impossible 3, think about Star Wars The Force Awakens. Then think about Mission Impossible 2 and Star Trek Nemesis and Star Wars The Revenge of the Sith. He takes dead franchises that are zombies that only the fans still defend, and he revitalizes them with his own brand of stuff. Now, on all three of those films I just mentioned are kind of similar. So the one concession we'd have to make is that the Superman, we'll call it Superman Rebirth, shall we? Kind of tie it in with the DC Rebirth thing. The one concession we'd have to make is that the Superman film would feel like The Force Awakens, would feel like the 2009 Star Trek film, would feel like Mission Impossible 3. Boo-hoo. There are worse things that it could feel like. Now, I'm not even going to argue that I love J.J. Abrams and actually think he's a really talented filmmaker. That's not the point I'm making here. My point is that he is very good at resurrecting dead franchises. And right now, if it's not actually dead, the DC universe is like this reanimated corpse just going around attacking people twice a year. And it's like, the results are not pretty. So, I want to help DC because I love these characters and I want to see them done right, and I'm sure most of you guys do too. Even the people who adamantly, vehemently defend the folks who defend that, I'm sure they want other people to like DC as well, right? Right? You guys, forget it. Okay, so you got J.J. Abrams on. Who do you get as Superman? I've said this one before, but I'll say it again. Zachary Quinto. He's stunning. He's intense. I think people woke up complaining that Quinto's Spock felt more like Superman. Just make him Superman then. You'd need to get him on a treadmill, you'd need to get him bulked up, but not roided up Batman bulked up, more like Captain America, Chris Evans. On that note, by the way, Chris Evans is Captain America, best Superman we've had since Christopher Reeve, who was the best Superman, arguably. So, could do worse than having Zachary Quinto with a body like Chris Evans and J.J. Abrams behind the camera. I want this film so bad. Another thing is, I think Bob pointed this one out, a lot of the chests for the men in the DC movies so far have been very much for the male gaze, like Batman working out. Forget the females at your peril, really. You really want women to be able to look at Thor and Captain America and Tony Stark and even Banner and go, and Star-Lord, and go, and Ant-Man, and Bucky, and T'Challa, and it's just so much on show. Civil War is like the sexiest movie ever. Forget the women at your peril, marketers. It can't just be for the dudes who like working out. Now, a lot of people pass off Superman as a Boy Scout. He's just a do-gooder. Now, this is not the case. People who really... I'm not going to be a gatekeeper and go, oh, you don't really know Superman. A angle on Superman, which I have seen done extremely well, is that he's conflicted. He wants to do good things, but at the same time, he wants to have his own life. But really, he kind of wants the world to be like him. Not in a... And this is the thing, not in a sort of, you must be like me, but he's trying to be an example to people. And when people follow his lead... that's him doing his job right. That should be the focus of the Superman films. So, how do we do this? Because you can't just, like at the moment, okay, this only works if you've seen Superman versus Batman, Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice, and you know what happened. So, spoilers for that movie. Spoilers coming up? Superman's dead. He's dead now. He's been buried. And in the Justice League, I don't know when they're going to be able to do this. Like, they just greenlit Man of Steel 2, and this is how they could make that film. Rather than doing it as Man of Steel 2, Zack Snyder's. Get rid of Zack Snyder, by the way. When I said Henry Cavill was poisoning the DC universe, he's the front man for Zack Snyder. Henry Cavill, relatively blameless in this scenario. Zack Snyder's got his greasy little hands on pretty much everything coming out of DC right now. I like Watchmen. I do, as a movie. I kind of like his other films. And that is a totally valid take on superheroes, but it should not be the be-all, end-all of superhero existence within the DC universe. And he's made it like that, because his Nietzschean take on the superhero, depressing as all hell, is pretty much across the board. It would have been so good if Zack Snyder had done one Justice League movie where they meet their evil selves. More on that in a second. You know, like the Crisis on Two Earths animated one, and the that was like a expanded version of an episode, like a double episode of Justice League, the Bruce Timm show. That's a valid point to make, and that's a valid Zack Snyder production, but it shouldn't be the be-all, end-all of the DC existence. Because Superman should be angry. It makes us feel more like him if he gets angry. Because if he's never angry, like the Brandon Routh Superman is a bit creepy because he never gets angry. There's Christopher Reeve Superman, when he goes "Ah!" at the end of that first one, we feel that pain and that rage. This Superman should get angry, but he should not be aloof and cold and miserable and depressed. And you know, he does that thing where he's like, he just sort of looks up and slightly to the left or slightly to the right, and he's like, people depress him. People depress... That's what I'm getting from Zack Snyder's Superman. People depress him. People depress all of us. You're the one who should be making everyone feel better. You have to push through that shit. You're Superman. So, how do we do this? We start with previously on Superman. Now, one of the main sticking points with this Superman is that his dad, Pa Kent, Jonathan Kent, Kevin Costner, told him when he was a young teenager, probably best not to help people. They even go back into this when he in Batman v Superman. This was in Man of Steel, but it's also in BVS. When he meets like a vision of his father saying, you know, one time, son, we rerouted a river to save our farm, but it flooded another farm. And it's like, probably best not to try doing anything good at all. What a terrible thing to tell Superman. Just like, we get that for every good action, there will be some repercussions which will be negative. But the way it's put across is almost like, you don't have to do this, what's the point? Kal-El, his nature should be to go, no, I know that there might be negative repercussions. We'll deal with them when we can. I have to be able to make these decisions on the spot, but my internal drive is to help people. Ergo, previously on Superman, we cut to the bit with the tornado. Remember that bit in Man of Steel? Jonathan Kent goes, no, stay back, Superman. Stay back, Clark. Don't save me from the tornado because people will see your super speed. Okay. Convergence point. Along this line, Man of Steel happens because he just holds back and poor Jonathan Kent gets whipped away by a tornado. Along this line, he saves him. And the people of Smallville go, whatever, and they see Jonathan Kent whipped out of the car and saved, and because he was like, you mustn't reveal your powers to the world. You must hide that power. Don't put yourself out there. They won't accept you. They might try to destroy you with what? They even say that at the beginning of the film. They'll kill him. How? Because his parents are wiser than Jonathan Kent. They at least understand the physics of the thing. This starts an alternate timeline where Clark begins his path to being Superman a hell of a lot earlier. The people of Smallville stare aghast, but decide to keep his secret. Why? Because they see he's trying to help. The whole school bus thing comes back out. There's a town meeting and they all decide, yes, we'll keep our secret. Of course, there will be a few people, because you cannot rule out the margin of people who just care about themselves or just care about, like, you know, fear-mongering. There will be some people who must be silenced. I don't know. I haven't figured out how the hell those people are dealt with. That's the big problem, glaring issue. You guys suggest some, though. Suggest some non-terrifying ways to deal with people who must just inherently reveal Superman's secret identity. Because it's the one flaw in this thing that I'm suggesting, and I can't, because there'll always be an accountable number. It, like, I mean, this is the flaw in the Superman mythos, basically. Someone's going to figure out Clark Kent, is Superman. There's no way you can keep that in a modern context. So either you keep Clark Kent, or you do away with Clark Kent altogether, or you keep Clark Kent and you have to somehow make amends for the fact that some people are just going to want to talk about the fact that he's Superman. Right. So, alternate timeline. And he grows up to be Zachary Quinto and not Henry Cavill. But he goes to the Arctic, he finds that ship earlier, he looks at the super suit and he goes, well, that's a bit black. And then he totally redoes it. Much brighter, bluer. Not quite cartoonish, but brighter, bluer. You know? When Man of Steel came out, it came out in the same year as Thor: The Dark World, and you stand those guys side by side, and they're both wearing bluish black leather with the same dark red cape. They look like the same guy. Superman needs to look like Superman, and at the moment he doesn't. Lighter blue, turquoisey almost. Bring back the little underoos. You know what? Make that statement. Bring back the outside underpants. The outer pants, if you will. I know there's some people who's like, that's stupid, but as a design ethic, you stick those on the outside, it makes a completely different statement to, we don't want the underoos. We don't want the underoos Superman, I don't want that Superman. Okay. So he's going around and helping people and just being Superman, and he comes out way earlier, like when he's in his early 20s, not his late 20s, early 30s. But we've still got that Zack Snyder Dark World where everything's charcoal, but when he flies around the world, holding up bridges, stopping people falling out of buildings, rerouting rivers to save, to make sure that farmers can get water to their crops, things like that. Just the natural disasters, not punching terrorists, not deposing warlords, just dealing with the stuff that nature throws at the world, and that he can be there to stand in the way, that he has a moral obligation to help them with. That little speech that Peter Parker gave in Civil War, that's my Superman. That's my Spider-Man. That's just like that's a hero. That's a hero that kids can go, yeah, it's very simple, but if someone needs your help, help them. Okay. As he's flying around doing this stuff, he brings color with him. If you guys have seen the redone, resaturated version of Man of Steel, where they basically remove the color, the filters that sort of took, bleached and leached the color out of the picture, and they showed you how it originally was supposed to look: blue skies, lighter blue suit, blue eyes, bright red, yellow sun, Superman, golden light. That's what he does to the world. It is symbolic of hope, and as we see him doing what he's supposed to do, he brings about a better world. Because it's not just about what Superman can do for us. It's what Superman can inspire us to do for each other. That's the point. The Justice League forms a lot earlier. They're not going to be in the story. This one's all about Superman, but he gets to know them a lot earlier. Maybe he gets to know Batman before Batman gets all angry. Because he is not my Batman in Batman v Superman. Not that my Batman's better than anyone else's Batman, but just it works best if they're both a bright line. Even Batman, a bright line in the darkness. Ethically, I cannot allow this to happen. Superman, ethically, I cannot allow this to happen. And for them to have different perspectives on the world. both of them basically to be able to team up without resorting to, like, they have to be able to think their way out of Lex Luthor's machinations. More on Lex Luthor in a bit. But the point is that the Justice League forms a lot earlier, maybe without Wonder Woman. Maybe she's been away for a lot longer and she hasn't visited again, because maybe I don't know, figure out Wonder Woman later. But I'm focusing on Superman because we got to get this one thing done. One and done. The old, like, just total reboot of the DCU. Sharon just came up with this one. She's sitting just there. Superman protects people from the world. Batman protects people from each other. Wonder Woman protects the world from people. So he's bringing back colour. This is the fulfillment of the promise of that beautiful Hans Zimmer music, which I'm not going to use because copyright. But you know the one I mean. That do do. Can I do that? Can I? You know the one I mean. Do do do. Just so well done, Hans Zimmer. Just that theme is wonderful. It elevates some dreary movies. He gives the people of the world an ideal to strive towards. The people accept him in a way that they never did in Batman vs. They're like, should there be a Superman? Holly Hunter says it. There is. Why are we even debating this? And then there's that jar of piss. Anyway, you can call it Granny's peach tea. I ain't drinking it. Man, that movie. From Superman, the entire DC universe stems, because he was the first superhero proper. And he is, the, like, as with Captain America, he is the one from whom all heroism stems. So when General Zod turns up along the regular timeline, Superman is totally ready for him. And then Zod's like, I'm going to blah, 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 blah. So he flies up straight away and he grabs Zod and all those other Kryptonians, punches them all out with his super punch. And then they're his prisoners. Because he doesn't have to kill them, but he is responsible for them. But if they keep them in an Earth prison, they're going to get super. They need a lot more time in the sun to get to Kal-El's level, but in prison, they might. I suppose you can keep them in a prison without light. Sequel idea. But along these, like, for this movie to happen, he doesn't send them to an Earth prison without light. Neither does he send them back up in their dick ships. He gets their, I want to say negative zone or phantom zone. One's the Fantastic Four, negative zone. Phantom zone. Too many zones. Especially as, do you remember in that Four Stick film? When they go to the negative zone, it's pretty much the same as the Phantom Zone in the Supergirl movie. If you've seen both, I'm sorry. But it almost like Peter O'Toole could come over there and go, oh, this is what's in that zone of what. Anyway, he makes a prison in his Fortress of Solitude with a portal after re-engineering, because he's a smart guy, Superman. After re-engineering their portal, and basically that's where he chucks all the criminals of unusual amounts of ability into. But then there's an uprising, and this could be like the sort of the middle-ish section of the movie, because like he's chucking them all in, and he has to be responsible, but they're all sort of gearing up, and like every time he opens the portal, it's like, whoa, too many guys in there, and they're all like, you know, forming an evil cadre of doom, and that's the thing. That's a thing for later movies. Like the idea of him being responsible and he puts them all in this one place, he creates the Legion of Doom. However, Supes decides, look, this is stupid. I can't keep going back to that same place. I'm just going to switch the channels here. And he keeps, you know, he's twiddling with the science of it. Lex Luthor fired a laser at Zod's dead body and created science. So it's that level. I think we can forgive Superman fiddling with the Phantom Zone computer thing to push into another world. Boom! He opens a portal to another dimension. Fans of my book series, New Century, will know how much I am preoccupied with other dimensions and alternate timelines. In this alternate timeline, there is a Superman who was killed by Doomsday and kind of let himself be killed because he kind of wanted humanity to like him in this sort of act of... it's egotism, basically. It's like, I want to die for your sins. Oh. And, you know, Batman and Wonder Woman went about making a Justice League. He's just opened a portal to the DCU for the first few movies. Good Superman. I'm going to call him Bright Superman here. And what he's done is, this actually takes place a few years later when Dark Superman has come back from the dead in whatever happens in the Justice League movie, because he's that evil Superman from Batman's vision of him. By the way, I keep like doing that on the desk and wobbling my camera. I apologize. So like he comes back from the dead and he's like, oh, sometimes dead is better. You don't want to go down that road and bring back the old Superman there. Evil Superman, bad, dark Superman, from that vision that Batman had of the future where he sort of comes in and I'm going to take off your mask and then burn people with eye beams. You let Lois die. And let's say Martha's also dead too in this timeline. So like the whole world is doomed. There's some bits of it that are still trying to get along, but there's dark side stuff happening and there's parademons and just like all kinds of just horrible craps happened. And so Bright Superman opens the portal and goes, oh my God. So he flies in there just to see if he can lend a hand. And he finds out about Dark Superman and then they meet. And rather than immediately fighting, they sit down and have a talk. It's that scene from Heat where De Niro and Pacino just sit down and talk. And we get 10 minutes of really good back and forth. Because Batman and Superman in Batman v Superman didn't know each other. They never really got to talk. They never got that scene where they sit down and go, you know what, if I see you coming around the corner, you know. And just, they never really got to compare each other's lives and compare each other's worlds. These two Supermen know each other because they are the same guy, to a point. But one's gone down one road and one's gone down another. So they talk. And it does not go well. And eventually it comes to blows. And they have the titanic mother of super fights. But Bright Superman, knowing that Dark Superman, in his haste to just have a punch up with Zod, was smashing up Metropolis, because we've learned from that shit, rather than just going, that island is deserted, so it's okay. He tries to take him up to the moon, because he's like, you know what, let's just get it out of the way of the Earth. And they're like smashing each other, and then like Dark Superman slams Bright Superman down into the moon, creates an enormous crater, and it slightly shifts the moon from orbit. Ever so slightly. And Bright Superman's like, this is going to cause much more damage than if we do it back on the Earth. So he swoom straight down to the Earth. And the fighting just sort of takes them all the way around the world and it creates damage. But every single time the damage starts to happen, Bright Superman breaks away from the fight and goes to pull the bridges back together. And like let the train go over his back. Remember that bit? And Dark Superman sees Bright Superman doing this. And rather than sort of racing in and like, boo, 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 he just sort of steps back and just sort of lets it happen. He's not going to save people, because at the moment he's not killing people in his life, but he's treating them like ants. He's like, you know what, if people die, ain't my problem. But Bright Superman cannot let people die from another world, because he is responsible for everyone. Not in a like, I'm such a do-gooder, but just like he can see they're in trouble. And this is the hero that kids want to see. Because believe it or not, folks, superheroes are for kids. The fact that we're adults who can enjoy them is a bonus. It is not the required audience. We want a Superman that kids, little boys and little girls go, yes, that is the Superman I want to see. And a Wonder Woman, and a Batman, and a Lantern, and a Flash, and a Cyborg. We want to see all the kids cheering for these guys rather than going, oh my God, this is dreary and miserable and dark and horrible, and what have they done to poor Martha? And I've tied her up and we're going to burn her like a witch. Jesse Eisenberg. You know what? Jesse Eisenberg, he's out. He's gone the way of Jared Leto because Jared Leto's out. Jesse Eisenberg, no longer Lex Luthor. You know why? Because in the Bright universe, old Lex Luthor, Papa Luthor, Lex Luthor Sr., did not die of whatever happened in the Dark universe. He's still alive. He's still the real Lex Luthor. And he's played by Stanley Tucci. Think about it. Have you ever seen Stanley Tucci be anything less than awesome in anything? He's almost always the best thing in everything he's in. So if he can come in as Lex Luthor, my God, he needs to wear that suit. And he needs to be able to be witty, but also menacing. It's not that hard to do Lex. But this is not a Lex movie. This is not a Brainiac movie. This is not a Zod movie. Every single Superman movie has been Lex and Lex, and that guy who was basically standing in for Lex in the third one, and then Lex again. And then, but there was Zod in the second one, and then Zod in Man of Steel, and then Lex again in Batman v Superman. Just get rid of them. Just do one without. The real villain, the real antagonist, is Superman's own selfishness. That manifests in Dark Superman. I'm just gonna, like two parts. One of them selfless, that way, and one of them selfish. It's a really simple, like you could even do Civil War style pictures where you've got Henry Cavill's face on that side and Zachary Quinto's face on the other. People may say, why don't they look the same? Because we want Zachary Quinto as the new Superman. And I want to give the Henry Cavill Superman one last go and show people this is not how Superman should be and close out that world. But again, you're technically right in a sort of, well, how come he grew up into this guy rather than growing up into this guy? It should be Henry Cavill for both, but then we're stuck with Henry Cavill. Well, then it should be Zachary Quinto for both, but then I'm not making the statement. So that's the one concession, along with the whole, what do we do about people blabbing about being Superman? Because that's the thing. Superman works at the Daily Planet as Clark Kent, bright Superman this is, and he actually does blend into humanity, because it's as important as Batman having a Robin is Clark Kent being able to be Clark Kent. Because think about it, without that, he's just some weird, lofty Dr. Manhattan god up in his fortress of solitude, like, oh, you pathetic people, like that. He needs to be down in the trenches. He needs to be able to see the people suffering and live as Clark Kent. And everyone in the Daily Planet who knows that he's Superman keeps his secret. And everyone who, tries to get his secret out there, I don't know, maybe they got the Men in Black in this world. I don't know. Maybe Star Labs have worked out a thing. They can explain it practically away with a sentence. So luckily, blah, 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 so we can deal with the people who want to out Superman. But the importance is that he kind of, if he leads the double life, it's for a good reason, rather than just, well, we got to have Clark Kent. So bright Superman and Dark Superman are still clashing in Dark Superman's world. And it's just this, it's all bright Superman can do to keep Dark Superman away from places that he will cause damage. They go to the Sahara. They go to the Arctic. They go to the Amazon rainforest, and then he sees all these trees burning because of the laser eyes. And he's like, no, I've got to stop this. And he realizes the only thing that he can really do is put him in the Phantom Zone. And he doesn't want to do it. But that's why he comes down to Earth in the first place, because he's like, I've got to have a plan. That's his end game. But while they're fighting and he sees Dark Superman hanging back while he's trying to save people, he realizes that there's still some good in him, something in there that's hesitant, some conflict. So rather than taking him straight to the Phantom Zone, he has one last-ditch plan. He grabs him by the collar, flies him across the dark world, through the portal back into his bright world, and flies him up and through the air, showing him the colours as he does so, but Dark Superman doesn't want to see it. He's flying him across the Arctic, he's flying him down, flies him down to Kansas. And they alight remarkably gently in front of the Kent house. You ever notice how in the Zack Snyder Superman, when he could just fly quietly up and away, he goes like that. He's just an asshole Superman. You know when someone's just driving down the street in a swanky car, and then they got to accelerate away from the lights, and they've got a good enough car that they could just go, but they got to go. That's Zack Snyder's Superman. But also his... Anyway. They're out front of Ma and Pa Kent's house. Ma and Pa Kent come to the door, and Dark Superman stares at them because he hasn't seen his father alive for half his life, and he hasn't seen his mother alive for years, because remember, she's dead in the Dark Timeline. And bright Superman goes over to them, and he whispers in their ear for a few minutes, and then they walk towards their son on the ground. And bright Superman goes back behind them into the house. He has no reason other than just hope that Dark Superman is not going to turn into some laser spouting sprinkler system. But it's important to him that he not just give up on this dark version of himself, because it represents that part of himself that is already in there, that could just be selfish. If he just goes, I'm not even going to trust him, I just got to get rid of him, stick him in the Phantom Zone, then he's pretty much giving up on the possibility of being able to deal with that side of him by just going, nope, everything will be fine. He has to deal with him. He is his own responsibility. So he goes into the house. Ma and Pa Kent come and sit down next to their son. And Jonathan Kent says, I was wrong to be paranoid. I was wrong to be afraid. I wasn't wrong to be afraid, but I was wrong to make you afraid. I was wrong to let that rule your judgment. That was not the right thing to tell you at that time. I should have told you to save people. Or I should have told you that if it is in your nature and you want to save people, then you do it. And don't be afraid. And his mother holds him. And Bright Superman comes out and he puts down a picture in a frame that he's picked up off the mantelpiece. And it's Clark and Lois getting married. And he had the ring in his pocket the whole time, but Dark Superman never used his X-ray vision to look. And that just floors him. And he's just done. He can't do the thing that he's been doing with his world anymore. But rather than just giving up to despair and going, well, and blowing his own head off, like would happen in a Frank Miller comic or something. Frank Miller now, not Frank Miller then. I actually quite like The Dark Knight Returns. Some bits are disturbing, but the way that The Dark Knight Returns ends, and that's sort of the bit on with the graveside, and when Superman looks at Carrie Kelly and goes, that's awesome. Man, the animated version's good. But rather than killing himself and just giving in to total despair, Dark Superman has to live with himself. He has to make amends. So the rest of the film, the epilogue, is Bright Superman just flying his brother around the world that he has helped to bring color to. And they can't see the color in that same way that we can because it is symbolic. But he can see that the people are happy, and it's because of Bright Superman. And Bright Superman becomes the inspiration for his own darker self. The manifestation of what Superman can actually achieve. And so Dark Superman goes back to the DCEU, and then we close that portal and we never speak of it again. Maybe for some kind of, yeah, you know what, hold that back for Crisis on Infinite Earths. We may go back to those actors. This version of events paves the way for the next Justice League film or the Green Lantern film. I miss Green Lantern. Do you guys just watch the Green Lantern animated series, the recent one, the CG one? It's wonderful. It's like Mass Effect for kids. And that's it. That's how you do it. Simple as that. No Lex Luthor, no giant robot spider thing. Actually quite a neat, like, hour and 40-minute Superman story about Superman. They don't have to be just like Marvel at all. And not every film that comes out after that has to be a J.J. Abrams style film at all. But there needs to be a tone that is set for the DCEU. An inspirational tone that shows how to move forwards. Because currently, it's broken as hell. Let me know in the comments where the pitfalls in this lie. If you can think of a way to deal with all those people who want to out Superman, please say so. Oh, and one more thing. The final shot of the movie. Some kind of elaboration on the Earth just there, and then Superman flying around the Earth, and he flies towards the camera and he smiles to us. They don't have to be beholden to the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve Superman. But that makes a statement. Superman, the real Superman, is back.